Thomas Markle was feeling abandoned. I was being chased and harassed on a daily basis by the media. I didn't know who to turn to. The people at the palace gave me no help at all. I felt utterly isolated. Now, Meghan had said that if he needed to contact the palace, then he needed to hop on a call with Jason Knopf. Apparently, she gave him Jason's contact information, and Jason was supposed to keep him apprised of all the things that were going on if and when Meghan couldn't be in contact with him. And Meghan somehow wasn't able to be in contact with him a lot. So the way he felt was that he had been completely hung out to dry, that he was alone and bombarded and nobody could make it stop, but nobody could make it a positive experience either, in the sense that he could be willing to deal with the paparazzi if he at least got to have his daughter in his life. But why should he live like this? I mean, these were all the negatives without one positive. Thrust into the spotlight, Thomas had become upset about the portrayal of him online, and he should have been. I mean, he did not come off well. He looked scruffy, obese, and they were painting him as some kind of alcoholic hermit. There were pictures of him coming out of a grocery store, and he had 4 cans of beer, and people were like, "Oh, look at the old man. He just does nothing but drink all day." Well, I don't know if 4 cans of beer would mean that, but the trolls on social media and all over the place were berating him. And we have to remember, too, that this wasn't exactly a time when people cared about anybody else's story but Meghan's. Right at this point in time, we were really not apprised to the goings-on at the palace. We didn't realize that at the palace, they all knew she was completely and totally out of control and a despicable person. We were still being fed the line, and the palace was helping us believe that Meghan was the loveliest person you could ever hope to meet. You know, what a philanthropist, what an activist, what a feminist, you know. What a boon that Harry had met such a wonderful woman. So it isn't our fault that we didn't realize, but I think in that atmosphere where everybody wanted to make much of Meghan Markle, the opposite of that was to turn against Thomas Markle, because it seemed like, why aren't you trying to be part of your daughter's life, man? What's going on? You know, what are you just out there in Mexico drinking and stuff and you can't make time to see your daughter? Nobody could have ever believed that she was aggressively making sure that he stayed in his place and didn't try to come to London. And she had nothing to fear because she knew he couldn't afford to come even if he wanted to. I mean, if he had decided to hop on a plane, if he had any money at all, that would have really been frightening for her because she couldn't have controlled him. She knew that he was the easiest person in the world to play. And the only reason that she let Doria in, as we've said many a time, is because she wanted Doria to help her with her racial background. What we're going to see in this chapter is the ramping up of the race card playing. And there's going to be people in the palace who predicted that this would happen. They see the way the wind blows and were really disgruntled when they saw Harry and Meghan leaning in on that play constantly. So anyway, here he is. He looks like a mess in the media. It does kind of seem, though, that if you knew the paparazzi was after you all the time and you couldn't go out without being bombarded, and you were concerned about your appearance, that you would just then make sure that you looked cleaned up when you left the house. I completely understand a couple of those photos at first being just a, regular guy going and doing his regular things. But knowing that people are watching you, it's now incumbent upon you to change your image if you want it to be changed, if you don't want to be a victim to it. So he felt like he looked like this bum, and then Meghan's over there, like the Duchess she's about to become, living this royal lifestyle. And because she was living in such opulence, it made his lifestyle look even worse. And the papers were speculating that Harry hadn't ever met him, speculating correctly. And people were just like, what is going on in this weird little relationship that Meghan has with her dad? And again, everyone at that time was Team Markle, so they were putting all the blame on Thomas for not being around. They also kept wondering why, in the media, they continued to question why he kept changing his cell phone number. I don't know how they knew he was changing it, but it's almost like, well, why are you guys wondering why he's changing his cell phone number? You're constantly harassing him. That makes good sense why you change your number. But anyway, at this time, beating up on Thomas Markle in the media was sold papers, and Thomas hated it, and he really wished that he could change it, and he really wished that Meghan would help him in the midst of all this. Well, he feels like he's being cast out and that nobody cares about him. he happens to have a rare phone call with Megan. Now remember, she tried to get Jason Knopf to deal with him as much as possible, although it would seem that Jason Knopf wasn't really doing all he could do because Thomas says he never heard a word from the palace. But in a rare phone call with Megan, Thomas said, and remember, he's planning on going to the wedding, okay? As far as he knows, he's going. He says to Megan and to Harry, and specifically to Harry, that he wanted to give a short speech at the wedding reception. That shouldn't be a problem. Why shouldn't he? He's the father of the bride. And shortly after this, Megan called back to say, Daddy, that's not going to be possible. You can't give a speech at the wedding. At the wedding reception, no less. Why would you want to do that? No, we won't be doing that, okay? Mm-mm. And by the way, you guys, can we not recall from Spare when Harry was allowed to speak at William and Catherine's wedding, and he gave this long speech about the crazy fans of the wedding and how somebody had sent her an ermine thong that they had fashioned out of some little creatures that they had hunted and killed, and he actually had the garment with him? I mean, if anybody should not have been allowed to speak, it should have been Harry. And remember, Harry makes this big deal about the fact that he had wanted to give, and this wasn't even at the wedding reception. I'm trying to remember where it was that he gave this speech. It was at a lesser party, I think. And he shouldn't have even been allowed to do that. And he was real sour about it. Knowing what it feels like to be excluded, he should have done something so that Thomas wouldn't have felt so excluded, knowing how that feels. But no, he says to Thomas, you can't speak. I wish somebody would have told you that, Harry, so you wouldn't have thrown that ermine thong around at the last wedding you were allowed to speak at. Okay, well anyway, no, Daddy, we're not going to do that. And of course, Thomas says that hurt, and it was the worst blow. He already feels like he's just being shoved out as quickly and as succinctly as Harry and Meghan can possibly do it. And he's really looking forward to going to the wedding, but it seems like they don't really want him there. I mean, they're only bringing him in 2 days before the wedding starts. They have made him this suit, but he's never tried it on. I mean, it just seems like they're letting him come, but so begrudgingly. And now he wants to give a speech and they won't let him do that either? I mean, it would just be like the most disappointing, depressing event of all time. Well, the award-winning lighting director was a proud man, says Tom Bauer. And he wanted public acknowledgement, even admiration, as the father of this remarkable young woman. Okay, I have 2 things to say about this. I think Thomas Markle has proven to us that he does not know Meghan well, or he isn't willing to accept who she's become. He seems like he's buying her public image as well, that she's this amazing, like crazy talented person. But if you ask me, this is some cognitive dissonance, because he knows firsthand that she's not an amazing person. She's mean to him all the time, and she's been mean to him for years. And it isn't as though this is a new side of Meghan that he's never seen. He keeps saying that. He keeps telling Samantha, she's changed. She's a different person. I don't understand. When she's with Harry, she is nice to me, but when Harry leaves the room, she's mean. Exactly. Methinks Meghan speaketh with a forked tongue. Because, what is this? And why is he so surprised by her? So I think that he doesn't want to believe he failed as a father. So he wants to believe this public image that she has, even though he knows how that public image was curated. He knows how it works. He worked in Hollywood. But he wants to believe so badly because that makes him feel like he is a success in his life, particularly at a time when he doesn't feel very successful. But to want to be linked to this person, to want to get accolades for it, I think really shows his heightening delusions. Because this doesn't even compute with his reality. Does he just not think everybody's going to find out who she really is? And that he still wants his name linked with somebody who is being perceived as wonderful and just hopefully no one will really know what the truth is? Or does he really think that she's a wonderful person and that it's just been a couple of off times when she's been so mean to him? I don't know. Whatever the reason, he did not like being shoved off to the side. He didn't like feeling like he was out of control of the narrative. And he didn't like feeling like all of his, I guess, work to help Meghan get to where she was, and financially we can all agree that he had helped Meghan exceedingly. He didn't like feeling like he wasn't getting any credit for all that. So, Samantha Markle, you guys, I have feelings about Samantha. Samantha Markle tells her dad that she thinks that there is a way for him to turn this all around in his favor. There need be no reason to be shoved off and to be painted in this terrible light. Take control, Dad. Take control, said Samantha. Well, this guy named Jeff Rayner had approached Thomas about taking some pictures of him that would help to curate his own public image. Now, Megan had been over there trying to curate her image for years and years and years. As the day is long, Megan had been working. So why shouldn't Thomas also use the same means that she had her whole life? But suddenly, when Thomas does it, it's terrible. Although, we'll go on to see that he wasn't working with the best of friends. Jeff Rayner comes, and he is a British photographer based in Los Angeles. Rayner offered to photograph Thomas preparing for the wedding. And Samantha told her father that the photos would show that he was not a recluse. Dad, you don't have to look like a recluse and a big fat slob. Let this Rayner guy help. The media was unfairly making him look bad, she later said, so I suggested he do positive photos for his benefit and that of the royal family. Samantha thought this would be a great plan. But so the thing is that Samantha hasn't worked with the media. She doesn't know. So how is she to counsel her father appropriately? I know that she's worked with the media as far as she's told her own story, but I would think that the outlets that want her story and to, splash her gossip all over the pages probably aren't great people anyway. So I don't really know if she should have been counseling her dad here, but she says, you try to take control of the narrative. If we were siblings in the same situation and we saw our dad suffering like this, we would probably try to help him figure out a way to take back some control. Well, that's all Samantha was trying to do. And although in an early phone conversation, Harry had warned Thomas Markle not to deal with the media because they would, quote, eat you alive, Thomas agreed to Samantha's suggestions and didn't heed Harry's warning. Well, I think he thought that how can this go wrong? I'm not doing anything mean or salacious or unkind or gossipy or anything like that. It's just me trying to look less of a mess. So I am so sympathetic to why he wanted to do this. I would have hated everybody acting like I was just this nobody, this big fat nobody living in Nowheresville, drinking my beer all day and ignoring my kid. What a terrible narrative. Anybody would want to change that around. So against his probably better judgment, he decides to work with Jeff Rayner. Thomas met Rayner at a restaurant in Mexico, and Rayner cut right to the point. He says, you look disheveled and fat, as he laid out media photos of Thomas, and they looked at them together, and there was Thomas carrying his 4 cans of beer, implying that he was some kind of heavy drinker that just drank himself into a stupor all the livelong day. And Rayner says to poor Thomas Markle, who's in a place where he just can't even make good decisions. He says, we're going to make you look great. Anybody who sidles alongside you in your despair, who you don't know, and comes to you with promises of grandeur, let's just make a note to ourselves to tread cautiously. Well, anxious not to appear as if the photos were staged, Thomas urged that Rayner take some long-distance candid shots. See, and this is where he should have held the line on this. I think this could have been pulled off if that's what they had done. If they got Thomas Markle looking cleaned up, well-dressed, combed, brushed, with clothes that fit, doing things that made sense. But what they ended up doing, I can't even imagine how Thomas Markle thought these photos were going to turn out well. Because in the process of taking the photos, he should have realized this isn't what we had initially planned on. These are not the long-distance candid shots I had asked for. Well, anyway, they signed an agreement. He was only going to be being paid $1,500, but then he was going to get 30% of the royalties. So I guess there's some money there. Now, this is the outcome. On the 27th of March, Rayner photographed staged shots of Markle in Rosarito glancing through a book of Images of Britain at a Starbucks, reading news stories about Meghan and Harry in an internet cafe, and being measured by a tailor for a wedding suit. Now, you guys, the tailor was some 17-year-old that they'd thrown a couple of bucks to, $15, to pretend to be measuring him for a suit. And when Thomas saw these pictures, he was blunt. He's like, these don't look like candid shots to me. And then he chooses to believe this dumb lie. Jeff Rayner says, don't worry. No one will know. Well, how will no one know, Thomas, when you yourself looking at the photos are like, that looks cheesy as hell? I mean, do you think that there's like some kind of filter they can put over it where it's a completely different photo? What? You knew that these were dumb. So to later play like the victim of, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like this. Well, I think you did know it was going to be like this. Unfortunately, he'd already signed the agreement, so what's he going to do now? He's going to have to cross his fingers and hope that Rayner can make it look decent. But how can he?